Hey, good evening, everybody. This is Jeffrey DeRose here. I'm the director of the CSI Tech Incubator, and thank you all for joining us tonight for our event with HubSpire for Open Data Week. Just before we get into things, just want to make say a few statements for housekeeping. First and foremost, just want to say, in recognition of International Women's Day, the CSI Tech Incubator wants to empower women in tech, and we want to just make sure that we celebrate the achievements and contributions of women to our society, while collectively we forge a gender balanced world for International Women's Day 2021 and beyond. So just shout out to all the women out there. You guys are doing great, and truly and honestly, the world would not exist without you guys. So thank you to the women. Um, Also, let's just introduce the incubator. So the CSI Tech Incubator is a growing tech hub on Staten Island. We're focused on bringing technology and entrepreneurship resources to the local community and beyond. We have our incubator program that's focused on early stage tech entrepreneurs, and we're also doing a lot of things in the areas of tech education with our tech talent pipeline and Girls Who Code. Um, Next, we just want to give a shout out to Open Data Week. Excuse me, I just want to give a shout out to the mayor's office for organizing Open Data Week. Open Data Week is a week-long festival of community-driven events organized and produced by the New York City's Mayor's Office of Data Analytics and Beta NYC. Every year, New Yorkers come together all across the boroughs to celebrate New York City's Open Data Law, which was signed into law on March 7, 2012. Coincidentally, the first weekend of March is also International Open Data Day. So together we use both dates to anchor NYC's Open Data Week and increase civic engagement with our municipal open data. So thank you to the mayor's office. Thank you to Beta NYC for organizing such a great event and allowing our university to play host for this during the week. And then now I'd like to introduce our guest speakers. We have Thomas Abraham, the founder and CEO of HubSpire. HubSpire is actually literally one of the top software development companies in New York. And also want to say thank you to Stan, who was a regional director of AI and data research at Microsoft, for joining us. And they'll be doing a presentation today. So with that being said, I'd like to give the floor to Thomas and Stan just to give a quick introduction, and then we could, get into the presentation you guys have for us today.
All right, Jeff, thank you. Jeff, if you were married, right now you have a girlfriend, I know that. She'll be very proud of you for that Women's Day shout out. But happy Women's Day to all of you. Now I'm going to use some of your lines today with my wife. I got to go and give her some shout out too.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jeff, for some great, kind words about HubSpire as well. Thank you very much. Hope all of you are doing great during these challenging times. We all know that COVID has really made a lot of negative impacts. I've been kind of looking for those small pockets of positivity, right? And, having having ability for these students to come out and just to see these presentation, I think these are all positive things. And what CSI is doing and the mayor's office, open data communities, this is a great thing. So when Jeff asked me to give a presentation, I was very honored, especially because I grew up in this community. I had a lot of friends in CSI. I visited the campus many times in the past, and today I have an opportunity, hopefully, to give you a high level introduction to the open data. Now, this open data is a really, really vast and probably we can talk about for months and years, right? But we're going to really focus on very high level today. When I first started my company, there weren't much incubators around, and it's a great resource. So, it's great to see that you have good participation here, and I hope, this will continue to grow. It's great to see so much interest from the community of tech innovators and entrepreneurs that are seeking to advance and grow through utilizing these platforms. So before we get started, just a little quick intro about me. I grew up in Brooklyn most of my life. I went to Temple University for my undergrad. I came back to New York. I was driving a bus for the MTA. In the night, I was going to NYU, completed my master's in technology management. And I worked for MTA for many years as an analyst. And before I left or ended my 9 to 5, I ended as a project manager at the MTA. I started my company HubSpire in a basement of my parents' house in Brooklyn. We started off with developing website, then went on to building mobile apps, then got into the data analytics because we were collecting a lot of data for our clients. So we realized how important that was, from data analytics to visualization. And most recently, we have added some cybersecurity line of services into our capabilities. Now we have a small office in New York City. We're located in Soho. We are a lean team, but our clients include MTA, who I used to work for. Now they're my clients. Lenovo, LG, Essex County, New Jersey. And most recently, we completed a project for Google. And we work with a lot of startups as well. And I have a feeling that, if you're here today, you're already taking the first step to becoming an entrepreneur here. Stan, I'd like to give you a couple minutes to just give a quick introduction to yourself.
Thank you, Tom. And I also want to welcome everyone here. Definitely interesting times, but we're certainly trying to make the best of it. Like Tom, you could probably tell I was born in Texas, raised on a farm. My parents are cowboys. Absolutely not. No, I also came to this country actually 25 years ago. I went to Polytechnic University, which is now part of NYU's Tandon School of Engineering. I think they change the name every 3 years, depending on who gives them money. But I think that was the latest name. I've held a variety of different IT jobs while working my way through college, from network engineering to desktop support to application development, database development. And then after college, I've had a number of different roles until I realized that I wanted to do something bigger and more challenging, and I applied at Microsoft. This was back in 2006. And still at Microsoft 15 years later, I've had a number of different jobs at Microsoft, but currently I focus on helping our customers get the most value out of data and insights using open source technologies and Microsoft technologies. The funny thing, and you'll see that in the presentation, I've actually learned about open data during a private business endeavor, and we used open data to help us navigate the competitive landscape. And then over the years, I've learned to find valuable insights in open data. And today it's a tool in my activity with customers. We use it as examples, we use it as inspirations, we use it as technology enhancers. And hopefully you'll see some of that today. I was warned that this is not a very technical audience, but I made a bold decision to show you some technical stuff, just a little bit. We're not going to bore you. No one's going to die from looking at 3 minutes of Spark. I hope no one's going to die. I did sign a release saying that I'm not accountable for any of that. So hopefully you guys will, guys and girls, will see something useful today that you can jot down on your notepad and take it, do something interesting with that. Tom, back to you.
All right, thank you, Stan. All right, so we're definitely going to talk about open data. Enough about us here now, right? Can you just go to the second slide, please, Stan?
With pleasure.
Thank you. So the agenda is really straightforward, very simple, right? We're going to talk about open data, some little bit of definition, the strategy, some of the platforms we use, and a lot of the data community uses. Then we're going to just touch upon data, advanced data analytics for anyone who's interested in pursuing that later. Then Stan's going to have the use case and some demonstration. That's really what you want to see, so you can see how to utilize this open data. And we're going to leave a lot of time for Q&A because I think that's really important. So Stan, let's go to the next slide, please. All right. So, there are three principal components in any successful open data, right? On the open data ecosystem. That's the first one is the citizen, second is the government, and third is the business. The data that is available, what does it do? It creates the open data creates transparency, builds trust, stimulate innovation, and entrepreneurship. Having this public data enables social enterprise to start up anywhere, reinforcing local economies, and also enable new generation of small businesses. And in this segment, we're definitely focusing on Open Data NYC, which is all like Jeff said earlier, the Mayor's Office of Data Analytics and the Department of Information Technology and Telecommunication. They're the ones that create this open data platform and team, okay? So what is open data? It's basically data that can be freely used, reused, and redistributed by anyone. So if you have access to it, now there are some terms, privacy policies that the NYC Open Data has, so you should definitely review it. But in general terms, it's data that you can freely use for, you can redistribute it, you can intermix with other data sets. You can also use it for commercial or educational purposes. So you can actually use this data to make money, right? There's nothing holding you back. There's no, there's no strict restrictions there. And the data sources various organization, but mainly government. Government is who really provides most of this open data. Now, where do you get this data? You can get it from government websites. GitHub is a private company. It's a source code repository. They also have a lot of open source materials that other users like ourselves, yourself, can go and share information. And there's a ton of information you can find there. And Kaggle recently found, I recently found this company. It's a private company. It's a community of data scientists and machine learners. They have a lot of contests focused around open data for cash prizes. So if you're looking for something to do, and if you're good at what you, or if you like what you're doing, you can definitely look at Kaggle and get some projects. Then, this open data, right? Availability and access. Most of the time, the data is distributed as a CSV, or known as comma separated value file format, right? So once you get the data, you can download it, and then you can use from Excel to many of which I will talk about in a few minutes. I'm gonna jump in over there. I do have some cheat notes here, so I am gonna look at my notes here, guys. So full disclosure that I have some notes here, otherwise I'll be all over the place. All right, so Stan, I think we can go to the next slide.
Absolutely. I just wanted to add to the availability and access. Most open data platforms make it available as CSV. Many of them also make it available through an API as a JSON document, so that data engineers can use Python or other data factory jobs to automatically pull and pull data. And the reason for that is that if you have a very large data set, and we'll look at some of these today, then pulling down a CSV every night isn't great, right? If you're looking at a 15, 20, 25 gig file, then downloading it daily or nightly, however often the data refreshes, is ineffective. There are use cases where it may work, and we'll look at one today, but typically you may want to retrieve the delta via an API by holding on to what's called the watermark. So you basically you store the last record or the last date when the data was retrieved, and then when you interact with an API, you only ask for data that's newer or fresher than the watermark itself. And then we'll talk about some of the challenges with open data, conceptual and realistic, that will click into some of these concepts on the later slides.
Real quick, would you just mind just explaining what an API is for those who don't understand or know what that is? Just simple definition.
Sure. So it's an application programming interface, if I'm not mistaken. It's an endpoint a programmatic endpoint which can be invoked or called through a piece of code. So instead of downloading a CSV, you basically have a unique URL. And by calling onto that URL, you will get a payload in response with an answer. And the answer might be a JSON document or an XML document. And what makes APIs interesting is that you can actually pass parameters into those calls. So you could say, I'm calling on all of New York City motor vehicle collision data, but I'm only interested in collisions that took place between January 1st, 2021 and today, right? You're not interested in all the collisions that took place in the last 10 years because you already downloaded that through what's called incremental data loads, assuming you've been running this for a while. So, and this is probably the most simplistic way of thinking about APIs. To Tom's point, there's three types of data. There's corporate data that's guarded and protected, and it's high quality data, and a lot of effort goes into enhancing it. There is what I would call semi-open data, right? The data that you could get from Yelp or Facebook Graph API or GitHub or LinkedIn, where you have to register, and either free or for a small fee, you get access to that data. And then there is free fully open data, which is what we're talking about today. So the open data that we're discussing today is always anonymized. There's other properties to it, but it's important to remember that it will always be anonymized, and that means that somebody has gone in. Is that how you say it in English? Gone in? It just sounds weird, but I think that's how you say it. So somebody went in and they modified it. They either sterilized it or they've changed the granularity of the data, or they removed certain components of the data to make it de-identifiable. And we have to keep it in mind because it makes this data more challenging to work with than, let's say, if you worked at Google or Coke or Geico and you were dealing with their internal corporate data. So we'll look into those examples later on, but I know you asked me a question about APIs, but I wanted to give a more holistic answer. I hope you don't mind.
No, that was perfect. Thank you. And you can continue with the presentation. Thank you.
All right, awesome. And by the way, that personal identification data that Stan mentioned, right? That's really, really that the whole privacy policy, all these laws that are there right now. I mean, it's really important. So any of the information that you get from open data will not have anyone's name, anyone's email, phone number, or addresses. It won't have personal, anything that can identify a person by any personal identifying information. So here, right, this types of data, right? So the open data platform, the NYC open data, they categorize the data sets. So you have a business, you have city, you have education, environment, government, and health. And then within each of these categories, they, like police, NYPD, for example, New York Police Department, I believe they were in the city, I think they were in the city part of the data sets. And then you have 311 that was also part of the city, right? And then the health for the hospitals that provide like COVID-19, right? Daily counts, hospitalization and death. That was part of, and when you go into the health category, you'll find that information. More like once you are in any of these categories, I've just listed just a few samples of the data that are available: college enrollment, the 311 service request. If you're looking for renter reported violation, you can find that in there. Road and inspection details. Then, we're a minority business enterprise. So if you're looking for the MWBE's minority or women-owned business enterprise certified business, if you're looking to get a list of all the MWBs in New York, you can get that from the open data. And then there's thousands of data that's available, right? Including geographical data. So again, when we think about any of these data, if you're looking at that motor vehicle collision, you won't know that Thomas and Stan got into a car accident at this intersection, but you will know there was an accident at intersection X and Y, Okay, so that's what Stan was talking about earlier. So Stan, if you can go to the next.
Absolutely. Do you mind if I jump in?
No, please, please.
So you're absolutely right. Our names are not going to be on that record, but there will be a time of day, a location, possibly a vehicle type, and additional information. We'll see that later on. But what a lot of our customers and organizations do is they pull this type of open data, and then they combine it with other sources, other data sets. So they might have their own data that they collect or purchase from another provider, or they might pull another open data set from NOAA, National Oceanographic Agency, right? That has historical weather and future weather predictions, right? So taking the motor vehicle collision for a second, right? So you got the motor vehicle collision data that shows you the intersection, so you know the zip code, or you actually know the location of that collision, and you know the time of day and the day of the year, and some additional data sets, right? So, but those two allow you to intersect with other data sets. So you can pull in historical weather information at no cost from NOAA, also open data, and then you can intersect those and you can see what was the weather when that collision took place. Was it snowing? Was it raining? Was there ice on the road, right? Was the temperature below freezing? Has the temperature been below freezing for the last 18 hours, which, preceded by rain or snow? So you could start inferring certain outcomes from that. Then you can overlay a demographics data set on top of that, also freely available. Now we're mixing NASA, federal, state, and local data sets, right? These are all open data, and we're mixing them to maybe benchmark certain areas based on demographics and time of year to see where accidents happen or where they might happen, given those factors. So the data set is useful, but it becomes more useful when you start enhancing it with other relevant sets of data.
And to that point, right? Many of the businesses that we speak with, whether they're corporate or government, even and small startups, they don't realize how much data that is available to them, and they need to do the research. The data is available, I mean, we're going to provide a couple of use cases, and Stan mentioned a few more right now. So there are tons of use cases that it's like almost unlimited in any business you want to do. And I have a couple of sample use cases that I'll talk about really quick in the next couple of slides. Stan, go to the next slide for 1 second, please. Thank you. Here you go. So now, we talked about how to go and get this data, right? We talked about, the types of data, and there's a lot more, but there's types of data. Now, if you're starting a business, or if you're looking to provide some information to someone, right, from this open data, what is it that you really need to do? Number one, you need to know what area of interest are you interested in, right? What's the business case for you? So you need to understand the data. So that's going to take some time. Like going to NYC Open Data, you can spend days, weeks, months there looking at data. There's plenty of data there. So you need to kind of have an idea of what you're looking for. Then you need to know where the data source is coming from, what agency. Then what data is being collected. So you have to look at, a single agency may have a couple of data sets. So you may look at each of them and look to see what each of them means to you, right? Then how often is the data updated? Because this open source data is not always available, unless sometimes, like Stan earlier said, they have an API, then you have readily available data that you can probably access anytime you want. But most often, a lot of this open data from NYC Open Data anyway, it's downloadable data. Each of these agencies, various agencies, they will upload at a certain day of the week. I mean, I've seen some of the agencies they're doing on a daily basis, I think, or a weekly basis. So it's various. It all depends on the availability of the data, and also, like Stan said earlier, scrubbing the data before they release the data. They need to remove any of the information that's that could be identify someone. So they'll remove that data, right? And the next step is you identify the data that you need, you download it. We're going to talk about not the API version of it. We're going to be kind of talking about the downloaded data sets. So once you download the data, what is the next step, right? So Stan, anything to add to that?
No, I think you're hitting all the right points. One thing that I think is important for us to realize is that, and you have to be prepared for this. This data might make sense when you look at a single data set, but mind you that when you start looking at it holistically, you'll realize that there's going to be some limitations that need to be engineered around. Let me give you some examples. As Tom was saying, some of this data is updated daily, some is updated weekly, some is updated monthly. Okay, noted. Another thing that you'll notice is that each data set has a schema, right? A schema defines the columns or the fields in the data set, right? So if you're looking at an API, these are your elements. If you're looking at a CSV file, these are your columns. Now, the open data providers, right? So NYC 311, NYC Open Data is a portal. The agencies are responsible for making the data available. And that schema can change at any point in time, right? They can go in and say, well, we're going to drop these 5 columns and we're going to replace it with other 2 columns. So you have to be aware that you're given something that, because of the license type, can change without your consent. So that's something to be mindful of. As you start doing your data engineering, you want to keep that in the back of your head. The other challenges that you'll discover is that data quality and data consistency might change on you, right? If you worked at Apple or Coca-Cola or pick your favorite brand, I guarantee you they spend hundreds of millions of dollars a year on data governance, making sure that the data is consistent, data is clean, meaning it has high quality, it has high integrity, meaning you can run a query or a job that interconnects multiple sets of data into a holistic result. With open data, each data set is independent of every other data set. So it's up to you to find those intersection points. And sometimes you have to do a little bit of engineering to make sure that those intersection points align.
Absolutely. Stan, we can go to the next slide now. So, if we want to just highlight some of the platforms to analyze the data. Now, all these tools require training, okay? There are courses that you can take, whether it's boot camp courses or college courses, but we use a lot of Power BI in our company. We use Tableau. We have used Google Data Studio recently. And then some of the other ones we have not used. And the NYC Open Data Platform, they also have a tool where you can visualize the data, do some filtering, and to extracting the data. They have a tool. I'm not sure exactly what they're using. It looks like a pretty customized tool that they've integrated. But there are advantages. Obviously, it's free and you can kind of extract the data that you want. But like using any of these platforms here, right, to analyze the data, you can bring in all your data sets, multiple tables, and then figure out a way how to link each of these tables together, and then use your own analytics. And some of them have a lot more newer capabilities of, from asking questions, you can just simply, type or even ask a question to kind of extract some of the data very easily even for beginners. But these tools, most of them, they do have free trials, and if you're like a single user, they might have free versions, but most of them have subscriptions. You got to pay for it, right? So these are all private tools. Stan, anything to add to this?
The only thing that I would add is, and you'll see this later, there's multiple roles within this ecosystem. There's a couple of tools here, and you know what, I'll use my little laser pencil here. So these, Tom, can you see me doodling on the slide?
Yeah, I can.
Okay, so these are your business intelligence tools. Typically, they require zero coding. So you're not a developer, you're not an engineer, you're most likely just using the interface and clicking and dragging and dropping stuff. And Tom's right, some of these are available at no cost. A lot of my customers use Power BI because it's free for the desktop. So you can connect to 3 different open data sets and maybe some of your corporate or private data and build it into a holistic model. You'll see that later on. Tableau, Looker, Click, they do similar things. So red is business intelligence. Purple is data engineering, right? So now you're crossing the path into development, right? You're using Python, you're using Scala, you're using R, you're using Hive. You're writing code to get insights out of your data. Many times you have to do a little bit of both. There are other options that aren't here that will show you in the demo, but just keep in mind that there's multiple roles and you don't have to be one person to cover every role. It's impossible. As a matter of fact, I don't have any customers that have mastered, where a single individual has mastered data analytics and data engineering, let alone data science or machine learning, which can also be done in Databricks and Apache Spark. So it's a big world, but we'll try to guide you towards the consumable boxes where it makes sense to you guys.
All right, awesome. So the next here, right, I just wanted to touch up on, like I told you earlier, it's a very vast, area, data analytics or data, or any kind of open data. So there are types of advanced data analytics. Right? If you wanted to, look further into it, the vision-based models. That's like image recognition. That would be like a vision-based models. That's when right now a lot of you see. You can go into a store, they can identify you with images and see who you are, race, color. I mean, they can do a lot of with visualization.
And most customers today deploy vision-based models at the edge, meaning it's not done in the post data collection stage, somewhere in a data center 3 weeks after they've generated the image, but rather using for instance, we have a lot of customers that use cameras, and this is, COVID reality, basically a security camera that's pointed at the entrance of the facility, and they run vision-based models on that camera, meaning on the edge, on the device, to figure out if there's mask compliance. So if somebody walks into a store or a hospital or a government facility without a mask, the machine will alert either a door operator or somebody at the security desk that there's a violation of the mask policy, where they don't need to put a person at every door and make sure that everyone's wearing a mask. It's a lot cheaper to put a camera and do that vision-based analytics on the edge than pay somebody a salary to just stand there and watch.
Great example, excellent example there. So the next one is NLP, right, which is the natural language processing model. That is basically understanding almost human natural language, right? You can record a complete session, and then you can have this model analyze everything that we spoke about, who spoke about what, and have a complete analytics based on natural language. And then the third one is the predictive model. This is what, like I think Stan mentioned earlier about the weather. So if you have enough data, this does require a lot of years of data, right? And that's not, you probably can't use it with, a couple of weeks worth of data. You probably need a lot of historical data. And then based on that, a lot of the application that we spoke about earlier, they can even predict the future almost. So if March had, average temperature of 40 degrees, and there's a way to predict what will happen in 2022, right? So that type of predictability.
Yeah, and to your point about traffic accidents, working with law enforcement agencies, part of their job is to reduce fatalities on the road and accidents. And if any of you guys and girls have friends that are police officers, they'll tell you that they know, they can predict stuff. They know what intersection is dangerous. They know what curve is probably going to get an accident, this month, because they've been doing the job for years and years. And that's called institutional intelligence, right? When the sergeant who's covered a certain area can predict how many accidents they're going to have on a certain turn in February, right? Because he's done it for many years. The problem is it's expensive to rely on people, and sometimes people don't make the best predictions, and people can't make massive predictions. So to Tom's point, right? Looking back at the data set of vehicle collisions, intersecting it with weather, and intersecting it with location, maybe there's a dangerous curve that when it gets a little icy, people take the curve at a higher rate of speed than would be prudent, and they go wide and they crash into the divider, right? And I think we can all think of a place like that is more prone to a car accident or a car crash than not. So the predictive model would be able to identify the likelihood of all of these locations throughout New York City. So the bureau chief for traffic division of NYPD would get a report that says, here's the 50 locations that we think has a high likelihood of experiencing a crash, ranked by the likelihood of each location, right? And then it's up to the human to decide, okay, well, I only have 10 officers, I only have 10 police cars that I can dispatch. Maybe I'll dispatch 3 cars to these 3 highest risk locations, and then I'll work with Department of Transportation to put up signage, the LED signs asking people to slow down, because reminding them that the road has ice and it's a sharp curve. It allows us to anticipate the future and react prior to something happening.
All right, great. Go to the next slide for a second, please. And I'm going to go through some of these use cases really fast, because I think, it'll start to make sense when we talk about these use cases. So obviously we all know restaurants in New York City, they do get violation notices from the Department of Health, right? And so let's assume that, you have a law firm, or a law firm has hired you, and you have a business that can provide some analytics. So what would you be looking for, right? So the law firm, they want to, my example is that in a law firm that wants to market, like they specialize in fighting restaurant violations. Okay. So they want to know, where should they actually market their business? Like, where do they want to get displayed? Where do they want to put a poster on the bus stop? Or where do they want to put their, those big signs on the roads? Where do they want to put it? So what they can do is they can go into this open data. They can get an idea of which restaurants in what areas are getting the highest violations, which borough, right? They can target a single borough, they can target a single zip code, and they can see how many violations are being have summons or violations for some of these restaurants. And then they can maybe they can now use another listing source to find the businesses' addresses. They won't know which business got the violation, but they will know, this area, 30% of the businesses get violations. So what they can do is they can send, flyers or mail pamphlets to every single restaurant based on the data from the open data. Now, the second, my example here is, let's say, for example, somebody here wants to, start a online tutoring company or a tutoring business, right? So when I looked through the open data, I found information regarding test results for math test results, SAT test results, graduation outcomes, school progress report, and there's a lot more that the education, if you go to the category education, you'll find all of this information. And now you can kind of combine these data, right, interlink them, and find out, okay, if I was going to start a tutoring business, where would I start, right? And then if you want to look at this, there's actually some new data about remote learning, so school attendance. That was another data set that you can bring in. Now, if you wanted to target those parents that you feel in areas that are the kids are not doing great in math, right? You can start to advertise to them. You can open up your business in that area. You can open up multiple locations. So these are just some really simple use cases that I spoke about here. I think, Stan, I'll turn it over to you now to kind of give us a full visual and an idea on how to use this data.
Thank you. No, and these are great examples. And I want to give a shout out to New York City MODA, Mayor's Department of Data Analytics, who manage the open data portal. So looking at the violation notices, New York City actually makes the data available with a very high degree of granularity. So they'll share the restaurant name, the restaurant location. Obviously, they won't share the owner's name because that's PII. We all know what PII is, right? But the business itself is a registered entity. Other government entities may not share as much, but MODA certainly does a phenomenal job at that. And talking about restaurants, I want to share a little story. So back in 2010, I was given an opportunity to become an owner in a little pizzeria joint in Brooklyn Heights. This is the downtown area next to Court Street. I don't know if anyone's familiar with Ramson Street, Court Street, that whole area. And my partner and I worked at Microsoft at the time, and I did this on the weekends and at nights. I managed everything related to marketing, advertising, relationships with online delivery services, photography, sales, data analytics, and he was responsible for running the whole store. So he took a leave of absence from Brooklyn Law School to start this business. And I'm a Microsoft data guy at the time, so you can imagine how the two of us immediately looked at our business from a data-driven perspective instead of a pizza-driven perspective, which I think made it very successful. So here's a walk down memory lane 11 years ago, almost to date. And as any restaurant in New York, you start getting visits from the health inspector. And these visits are usually laced with fines and violations. No matter how clean you keep a restaurant in New York, there's always fines and violations. And I'll let you know a little secret. When you go to your favorite McDonald's or your favorite Italian restaurant, and they have a big letter on the window that says A, it doesn't mean that it's a clean place. They could have rat droppings, they could have infestations, they could have other violations, because A does not mean clean. A means they have less than 13 points on their violations. So an inspector comes in and they bring a flashlight. They have a flashlight here. They bring a flashlight and they go like this and they start shining under the counters and they start counting rat poopings, basically. You go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, count 5. Well, that's 2 points All right, let me take a look in the fridge. All right, I see you have some stuff here on the floor. That's another 3 points. Let me check the cutting board. Let me check the lighting. Let me check the HVAC system. So, at the end of it, they come back to you and say, well, you've gathered up, let's say, 13 points, right? That's a very expensive visit. It's like getting a speeding ticket while driving drunk and being impounded. If you think about the disaster and how much that would cost, it's roughly the same. These visits, they can cost you $500,000 to $3,000 easy. You're still an A-type restaurant, still the best, cleanest restaurant on the street, but you just spent $3,000 on fines and violations. And I gotta tell you, these inspectors, they always have something to find. And the reason why they always have something to find, at least in downtown Brooklyn, is because most of the buildings are over 100 years old. Some are 150 years old, and they share their basement infrastructure. So you could have 10 buildings in a row, and the basement infrastructure is penetrable, meaning if you have a neighbor 5 buildings down the street from you who's piling up garbage in their basement, there's going to be rats and other rodents. They will find their way into your basement and potentially onto your sales floor. It is unavoidable. The best that we could do and the best that any restaurant can do is clean twice a day before you open up and when you close up. You're constantly cleaning. You can't get rid of rodents. You could only minimize or eliminate temporarily their presence. Now, in 2012, Mayor Bloomberg signs this open data law. The first thing that I do is I go on the site and I see if I can find any data relevant to other restaurants and their inspections. And let me see if I have an example here. And would you believe it? But they actually started posting it. This is the open data page. I'm going to zoom in a little bit. Can you guys see my screen?
Yep.
So not only does this data set contain every sustained or not yet adjudicated violation, but it also gives you a lot more useful information. So I started pulling this in, and they give you the schema. So they tell you what are the columns in the data set and the description of each column. But the good stuff is here, right? The good stuff is here. They give you the restaurant ID. They give you a DBA. Does anyone know what a DBA stands for?
Doing business as?
That's right. That's right. Like if you were a database admin, you'd say it's a database admin. No, these are not database admins. These are business entities. This is how they register their business, right? The borough, the building, street address. So all great stuff. But what was really, really, really important to us are these things. It was important to us to understand what type of cuisine are they serving, right? We were in a pizza business. So we wanted to benchmark ourselves against other pizza businesses to see what kind of violations they were getting and how they were targeted. But also we wanted to know, how do we benchmark against other restaurants, Chinese, donuts, Middle Eastern, and so forth. And then the other really useful piece of information for us was the violation code. Now, what you'll see here is that there's nothing related to the dollar amount. You won't see here anything that says, well, this restaurant was fined $500. They give you the violation code. They give you the violation description here as well. And if you're ever interested to find out what's happening in your restaurant, go check it out. Now, mind you, every restaurant has violations. Do not fool yourself that the restaurant that you go to is the cleanest in New York. If you like the food and they've passed the Department of Health inspection, it's safe enough. So don't stop going out. Don't be afraid. It is what it is. New York is one of the cleanest cities in America as far as restaurant inspections go. So what was important to us is well, what's going on, right? These violations are important, but what's the cost? Because we're always thinking, okay, what's the dollar amount associated with these? Now that's not in this data set, but we did some digging and we found another data set on their website that wasn't posted here that allowed us to create a link and intersect. We've talked about these intersections between a violation code here and the other data set that basically said, well, and this, an example, violation code 06F is $450. Violation code 06E is $375. Now you could see where I'm going with this, right? You took two open data sets, you mesh them together, and then you know how much money are these restaurants spending on tickets and what kind of tickets they're spending it on. So at Tom's request, I went and I looked for the analytics dashboard that I built 7 years ago, 6 years ago. And I was able to pull it up. So this is it. You'll see at the bottom that there's, let me change this to red. You'll see at the bottom that there's more tabs, geospatial tabs at the bottom here, historical analysis, maps, financial tabs. Unfortunately, at the time I was using a technology that is no longer supported. It's called Power View. Today, there's a different technology that does this a lot better. It's integrated into a BI platform, but if I launch it, you won't see anything. But I will show you what does work. So what works is this kind of analysis, where we were operating out of Kings County, Brooklyn, right? So you look in Kings County, it pulls in all of the violations, and it updates all of this data on the fly. So it was allowing us to first of all understand what's the trend. Is Department of Health doing more inspections or less inspections? Are we going to see the inspector once every 6 months or once every 3 months, right? Where are they trending? It was also interesting to understand how much funding they were collected, right? This is important to know. We were able to juxtapose different types of cuisines to see how many, on average, how many points each of these cuisines collected. So, without pointing to anything here, at the risk of offending anyone, I'll say that, Chinese is one of the cuisines with the least amount of violation points on average, and you could see some that have a lot more on average. And then we were looking at specific restaurants in our area. We wanted to see who's struggling, who's being targeted, what are they being inspected on. And we'll get into a little bit more examples later on, but this was a fun time, right? So intersecting these data sets, understanding it. And, when we started looking at it, we realized that these rodents, it's almost kind of predictable. Like if we see restaurants around us that are being inspected, being called out on rodent problems, we knew that we had to pay extra attention to our cleaning protocols. We were able to optimize, well, first of all, understand and optimize market segmentation by combining data from Yelp to combining data from this data set. We were able to target potential customers in areas for delivery, obviously, in areas where they didn't really have pizza restaurants with a clean record or a good record like us. We were able to do churn analysis where we could tell when a customer stopped ordering from us, and within 30 days of a certain window, we would send them a gift certificate asking them or offering them, a freebie if they placed an order. There were a lot of interesting use cases, but we mostly work with data sets from open data As I already said, Department of Health finds data sets so that we could see how much each of our neighborhood restaurants were expected to pay in fines. Yelp, and intersecting it with a POC system. And this is what we talked about, right? You have open data, which is great and valuable, but it becomes a lot more valuable when you intersect it with your corporate data, right? I mean, a pizza restaurant running by 1.5 guys is not a corporation, even though it's registered as a corporation with New York State Department of Finance. But we had a point of sale system, and a lot of restaurants that you go to, well, not today, they have an iPad, but back then it was like a machine with a screen with a card swipe, and it had a database running within it. So that's your corporate data, right? That's not open data. That's data that's only accessible to whoever is running that business. And intersecting those data sets gave us some really interesting and valuable insights. Thomas, any comments, questions?
No, so far so good.
All right. So that's, almost 10 years ago. How would we do that today? Well, today we would use a modern business intelligence tools. One of the tools that was presented on the slide that Thomas shared with us. And again, I'm a proponent of tools that are either free or as inexpensive as possible. So in this case, it's Power BI. It's a data visualization tool, allows you to connect to various multiple data sets and interact with that data on the fly. So for instance, this is the New York City 311 data sets. It's got about 25 million records. It would be quite difficult to load this onto your MacBook and run it in Excel. As a matter of fact, I'm pretty convinced that Excel would crash a half a dozen times while you were trying to load a file like this. But because you're using a business intelligence tool, not only are you able to quickly slice and dice the data, you can navigate it at a fraction of the time, right? And it feels very, very snappy. So, if we were doing that same exercise today, we'd basically look at the complaints, and we would immediately see a couple of things that stand out, right? So there's rat sightings in Brooklyn. Now, all of this data is real. I'll show you where you can download it and how you would make sense of it. Rodents, insect, garbage. Now, this is big because it's actually connected to this. And as well as conditions attracting rodents. You have to excuse my doodling here, but I just wanted to underline these three. They're actually related because when New York City Department of Sanitation, and they do a phenomenal job, these guys are my heroes, but sometimes they're unable to get to the garbage in time, or maybe the garbage gets ripped, or maybe it's put outside a day before the collection day, or maybe it's hot. There's multiple conditions that attract rodents. And when rodents are there, they don't just go away. So it's very, very important to understand where these localized problems are taking place, so we can get one step ahead of the problem. So if we look at, let's say, rat sightings, you'll see that these bubbles just shifted. I'll do it again. So this is a chart that we put together that shows the number of incidents and how long it takes New York City to actually respond to an incident. So we're seeing that Brooklyn here has the highest number of incidents, and it takes roughly, what is that? Like, let's say 620 hours for New York City to get out and look at the problem and close it. In my opinion, the number is way too high, but it is what it is, right? And there's roughly 191,000 incidents. But if we just click on rat sightings, those numbers will change a little bit. You see that Brooklyn moved to the right a little bit. And so we were in Brooklyn. We wanted to know how many incidents, how often, what time of year, right? So we could be a little bit more proactive instead of being caught unprepared. So taking this data and then plotting it into a map, we'd be able to see what is going on. So let's see. Our restaurant was right here. Our restaurant was right here. I'll draw a little box here. And you see that there was a rodent sighting literally just 1, 2, 3 buildings over, right? This would let us know that there's problems that we can't see because we don't see any rodents in our basement. But if there are 3 basements over, they'll probably get here. For us, it was a leading indicator, an early warning system. Another good term for you guys, a leading indicator. So that's how we would do it today from a data visualization perspective. But there's obviously a lot more than that, right? The way we did it was by hand, right? We literally downloaded the data, we massaged it, we worked on it, we tweaked it and tuned it, and then we loaded it into a dashboard that allowed us to make more intelligent business decisions. But that's not how enterprises want to do this. Enterprises want automation. They want robotics. They want machinery to do that. So, with your permission, I'll take 10 minutes to show you how, if you were being hired at, pick a favorite company of yours, Nike or Adidas, this is how they expect these systems to work. Most of them look at data on a certain maturity model. And you can easily figure out which stage your customer or your organization belongs to.
So and one quick thing, Jeff just reminded us that, time, so we're past the 7:30. I know when you get into this depth stuff, I know you can talk forever, but just want to keep time in mind because we end at 8, right?
I'll 6 or 7 more minutes, and I'll be done with this. Thank you. I suggest you take a screenshot of this. This is self-explanatory, but it will really help you figure out where are you and what is the next step and where do you want to go and how do you get there. I'm not going to drain the slide and read through it. Then as far as automation, there's usually a path. It's like a pipeline. You get the data from somewhere, then you ingest it, you prepare it, then you enrich it, and then you serve it and you make it available. Take a screenshot of this as well. And what you'll see here is kind of a parallel flow. At the top, you have something that's called data factory. These are low-code, no-code environments. You don't need a developer, you don't need a data engineer, you don't need a data scientist. You could probably get 90% of what you need combining open data with cloud data, with other data sources by using this. And then you want to load it into some kind of either a data lake, or you want to load it into some kind of a database or a data warehouse, right? And then you visualize it using the tools that we just saw, Power BI, Tableau, or consume it in apps. The bottom here is data engineering. That's for folks that know and understand languages like Python, R, Scala, that are a lot more comfortable writing Jupyter notebooks to do those same steps. And sometimes you can interchange them, but you have to ask yourself, do I want to spend more time on the bottom here and less time on the right, which is where all of this stuff sits, right? All of the stuff is here on the right. So you gotta figure out where do you want to spend more time. But another great screenshot, and I think we'll share the presentation with you. And another screenshot of what those pipelines might look like, right? This is a fairly comprehensive pipeline that retrieves the data from Open Data API. It also retrieves data from NOAA. It gets weather data. It intersects it. It does some predictions. It does some data quality. and then it loads it into a database so that it can be consumed and served through a data model, right? So that your business analysts don't need to be data engineers or developers. They can clicky, drag a droppy, which is a technical term, just like we've seen us do with Power BI a few minutes ago, right? They can answer their own questions without coming to you every time and saying, hey, can you change this function, or can you write another notebook for me? I'm going to skip the technical demo so you can all exhale. But what I was going to show you are two environments. One that's called Azure Synapse that allows you to query very large data sets. And I'm talking about files that are 14 and 15 gigs in size, query them on the fly without loading them into your MacBook or trying to shove them into Excel, and run queries on it, right? So very effective way of doing data exploration with a language that's called T-SQL. If anyone's learning databases, that's the golden standard in databases. But also you could do the same thing using Python, right? So this is Azure Databricks. It's a Spark environment that can run Jupyter notebooks, scale out very, very fast. And it has no problems handling files with, multi-gig or 20 to 50 to 100 gig files whatsoever. I want to pause here for just a second. We covered a lot today. And your head might be going woozy. We talked about data science and machine learning and data visualizations and data modeling. It's a lot. But taking a step back, there's actually just three different roles. Three different functions: data integration, data engineering, and data science. Again, I'm not going to drain the slide, but if you take a screenshot here, it will put everything that we talked about into a very clear and concise picture for you. For instance, the pipelines are data integration, right? You ingest it, you transform it. Python, that's data engineering. Data science is for determining strength, relationships, and predicting, and machine learning, all of that good stuff. But when we looked at dashboards, that's business intelligence, right? You don't need to be a developer to create dashboards to tell a story with your data. Again, I think it's a great slide. We didn't come up with it. This is freely available on the internet, but it's the cleanest one that we found that articulates all the concepts that we covered today. And with that, running a few minutes over, I'll turn it back to Tom.
Well, Stan, you know what? I was taking some screenshots myself. I think there's a lot that we all can learn. So, data analytics and data visualization, business intelligence, this is a big, big area. And I would definitely recommend, for those of you that are starting, either getting more in depth into this to focus. This is a very high level discussion here, and to kind of think about what you like to do, and whether you're starting a business, focus on one of the areas first, and then master it, and then slowly get into the other areas. That'd be a great place to start. So Jeff, I'll turn it back to you now. Thank you very much, Stan.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you guys so much for giving such a great presentation. I know we ran over with time a little bit, but great presentation. I personally learned a lot, and we do have a few questions from the crowd. First question is from Ismail. Can you recommend any resources to get started to learn how to analyze open data?
Stan, you want to go? You want to take a shot at it? I had to think about it to see.
Yeah. No, I'm also looking at the questions. Which one?
It was sent to me directly.
Oh, okay. Sorry, can you read the question again?
Can you recommend any resources to get started with learning how to use open data?
That's a great open-ended question. In preparation for this, I found a couple of sites that aggregate open data sources. So first is what's available, right? The ingredients. The second is what do you have in the kitchen? Are you gonna sear it? Are you gonna boil it? Are you gonna cook it? That depends on what you want the product to be like by the end of it, right? So it's a cyclical process. Go look at the data sets that are available. Use your imagination as to how you can use it. Find a free tool that doesn't require you to spend tens of hours in data engineering. Again, my favorite is Power BI because it's free. You can download it on your desktop. You can ingest that open data set and start playing with it. And you see that there's value in it, then think about engineering it into a pipeline. If there's no value in it, all right, so you spend a couple of hours interacting with it and you move on. As far as the actual coding and skill sets, look at the major cloud providers. Guys, this is all going to be in the, so first of all, open data is in the cloud, right? No one's gonna ship you a thumb drive with open data. All of it's already in the cloud. So look at leading cloud providers, Azure, Google, Amazon. Most of them have no cost training for data science, data analytics, and data engineering, right? Just look for those keywords and you'll get access to tools and methods for data manipulation. But first, start with free and simple tools just to see if there's value before you start investing time in learning Python, unless you already know Python, just to figure out if the data that you're looking for can be used for anything.
And I think also just to add to that, I think, probably the best place, you can go right to the NYC Open Data platform, go to their website. And, there are some visualization, like I said, there's a tool there that you can actually analyze and you can filter, you can do all the basic things right there. So I'd say that would be a great place for, just someone starting out to look at it, just to get an idea what you can do with it.
Excellent, excellent. I have a question from someone in the crowd, and I want to unmute him. It's Max Monterey. He's actually one of our cohort companies for the incubator, but also an ex-data guy at Microsoft as well. And he has some interesting questions. So Max, I'm going to unmute you and let you ask your 2 questions.
Thanks, Jeff. I appreciate it. So thank you for having this event. First of all, Thomas and Stan, thank you so much. And I appreciate and respect the recognition of International Women's Day as well. My question's around data privacy, data ownership, and data governance. So we fully understand right now facial recognition technology is creating structured data out of unstructured data. That's in the hands of other people. And technologies like what I'm working on right now with regards to structuring data around video and biomechanical motion, it becomes a real tricky and thorny issue around both privacy of data, what is private, and who owns that. And furthermore, beyond the engineering and analysis work that I'd done at Microsoft, I worked heavily in terms of governance of that data, the policies that we put in place with regards to internally how we hold that, but it didn't necessarily correlate directly with the agreements all the time that we would make with regards to privacy and ownership with the consumers of that data. So how do you see, with the ubiquity, speed, scale, and size of data these days and all of the technologies around it, changing the privacy of data, changing the ownership of data, and changing the governance around that data? Thank you.
So, Stan, you know what? I think with a lot of these policies, right? Like, for example, GDPR right now, that's, they are kind of very, like, they're so much more advanced than how we are looking at data, right? You can't even have, a citizen in the UK, their data, you can't even host it in the US. You have to have it in their country. They had to be able to extract the data anytime they need it. They need to be able to delete their data. So there are a lot of restrictions. Now California is adopting something very similar to that, right? The COPA law. And, I think when it comes to the privacy, like government has, I think as, individual business and corporations have their own policies that they've set up, but it has to be driven by government, I think. So, I mean, I think that's where we're probably going to start. Stan?
First of all, it's a really thoughtful question. Really thoughtful question. It's on minds of some minds of many great people, without naming names. I don't think there's a good answer for that, to be honest with you. I think it's something that is a work in progress, and it will stay a work in progress. And certain companies take leaps forward. I know Microsoft has something that's called an ethical AI board. So when we release our machine learning models, there's a board that investigates those models to make sure that those models are not biased towards any population or corpus of data points. It's trying to be very generic. But relevant to open data, it's important to remember that all of it is de-identifiable. However, it is possible to identify an individual through an de-identifiable or anonymized data set. And it's possible by intersecting multiple data sets to get to it. So think, imagine you have a small town, and that town has reported 3 cancer patients. And one of the cancer patients is a man, and he's 56 years old. And that town can also release another open data set that also identifies that individual through other metrics. And then by intersecting those two, someone could say, well, I know, we're talking about John Doe because it's him, it's gotta be him, right? He's the only, person that's getting pharmaceutical deliveries, and he's 56 years old. So, and this is just me talking, I think the responsibility is on each one of us to ensure that whatever we create does not jeopardize privacy for anyone around us, and it's going to be a constant exercise.
Thank you.
Sorry, Max, I wish I had a $1 million answer to a $1 million question.
Okay, great. We have another question from MTJ in the crowd. I don't know his full name, but that's his initials. So MTJ, I'm going to unmute you, and you're free to ask your question. You there, MTJ? I see you're unmuted, but we don't hear you. I'm not sure if you want to just write. If you want to write your question, then you can write your question. I'm not hearing you.
Hey, Jeff. I don't think they have their audio set up right now. I believe I sent you the question in the chat. If you just want to read it off through there.
Sure. MTJ stated that he said, I'm a GIS analyst, so my DB queries are location based, so database queries for the people at home. But how to leverage the large open data sets is new to me. Maybe he's just asking, how can he leverage open data with his location based work that he's doing? If you guys could answer that.
Sure. So, we're talking about that use case that we covered a couple of times, where you have an open data set and you have a corporate or a private data set that's not open data, and finding a way to intersect those from a business perspective. What's the value? Is there an open data set that can enhance or give additional insight or give additional value to what he's currently doing? So the first step is obviously to go and look, right? And use a little bit of imagination and see if you can identify those data sets. If you can identify those data sets and you feel like, oh my God, that'd be great, right? Intersecting my geospatial analytics with weather information, with demographics information, right? To expand the number of attributes or features in your data set, then the question becomes how? How do you do this, right? And we've talked about some of these approaches today. I think the industry is moving to the cloud. So pick a cloud, learn the tools, upload your data sets, download the open data sets, and then mesh them together using whatever technology you're comfortable with. It might be SQL, it might be Python, it might be R, it might be something else.
Okay, excellent. That was a great response. Does anyone else have any questions at home? I wrote this in the chat, but if anyone has any questions, feel free to ask or write it in the chat. There's no such thing as a dumb question with us, so don't be shy. Or even if you have questions related to your business, maybe you're running an operation, you have some ideas for how to use open data, feel free to ask if you have any questions related to your business at home.
I do have a question. So if I'm like a small business owner or inspiring entrepreneur, and say I'm not really tech savvy, I don't have the hardware, I don't have a powerful computer, are there any like recommended computer specs I would need to analyze data locally on my machine?
That's a good question. So I'm going to sound like a salesman. I'm not. But the modern business intelligence tools leverage something that's called columnar compression and in-memory engine. So if you download a tool like Power BI and you download a 13 gigabyte CSV file, right, you can point Power BI at that huge file. Power BI is going to import it, and it's going to squish, it's going to compress it by roughly 90%, and it's going to load it into memory. So you can work on a 13 or 15 gigabyte, just like the data set that we were looking at for New York City, which is currently at 14 gigabyte per day. You can work on a data set like that on a medium-sized machine. As a matter of fact, my server is this. This is where I do all of my heavy-duty data analytics, data modeling, and data visualization. That's it, right? Because if it's too big to fit on a desktop, it doesn't belong in a desktop. It belongs in the cloud. And in the cloud, you only pay for it when you're using it. So you can spin up a Spark cluster for 60 minutes, load 300 gigs of data in it, do your analysis, export the data into a CSV document, or better yet, don't export into a CSV, export into something like Parquet, which is smaller and faster and cheaper because you pay for space, and then destroy the cluster, right? So you spent $35 on it once a month, but you got your job done in 60 minutes instead of spending 6 days swearing at your computer. So start with tools that are free and available on your desktop, like Power BI. And then if you feel like it's not holding its weight, think about the cloud. It's probably a lot cheaper to pay for a couple of hours of compute in the cloud than it is to buy a desktop.
But Ismail, I think one of your questions was that if you're a small business, right, and like I don't know, like all this data, for someone to analyze and using these tools, right, you definitely need to have training, right? So whoever that business owner is, he's going to have to be, he's going to have some training on how to use his data. Okay, that's really important, right? So just keep in mind. So, when you say open data, it's available, but you got to know how to use it, right? So there is some technical capabilities that is required.
Excellent. Great response and great question. We got MTJ back. So MTJ, you have the floor to ask your question.
Hi, thank you. I just had to laugh because you were referring to me as him, and
I apologize.
oh, no worries. I just had to laugh because it's the women's whatchamacallit thingamy. And so thank you for answering questions. I actually had to go back and listen to your answers again. Thanks for sharing the presentation as well, because I was trying to figure out how to connect my audio, so I missed the whole answer. But Yeah, I have experience with location data and hooking data sets together by location. So this is kind of new and interesting, especially if I also hear in a lot of your presentation, like the town, there's a lot of where, like where is, which I kind of hook into when I hear location clues, you know. So all very interesting. Thanks so much. But I just had to share that I'm not a him.
Yeah, I apologize for that. And
oh, no worries. It's awesome. I'm loving it. Thanks.
okay, yep, for sure. Thank you for your question.
Okay, take care.
Yep. We have a question from Mamadou. Mamadou's ask is one-on-one consultation available to get a detailed training with anyone?
So, I think one-on-one training on this kind of subject, you're not talking about a single day, right? You're talking about probably, weeks, several weeks, months, right? So, it won't be possible for a one-on-one, but, please feel free to share my email, Jeff, after the call, after the presentation, and I would love to, guide them to some of the training that our team internally, like, we take interns and we have a great program, for beginners that come to our company, so we can definitely guide them to complete a set of courses, just like, you would have a job at HubSpire, right? What training we would expect anyone to go through. And then after that, right, they can come to us with the one-on-one consultation that would definitely be provided.
Yeah, and maybe just to extend upon that question, maybe there's people at home who's maybe asking, like, are you guys available just for consulting in general? Maybe they have a business and they just need some help figuring out how to use open data, how to, what kind of products can they build with open data? Are you guys able to give some help in that regards for someone trying to build products?
Oh, definitely.
Okay, so yeah, so I'll make sure we follow up with we're gonna have a recording of tonight's session. I'll make sure I follow up with your contact information for Thomas, with your information, Thomas, for anybody that needs. We have another question from Mr. Allen. Excuse me, I don't know if it's a Mr. or a Mrs., but there's an A. Allen. Let me not make the assumption. But this person asks, can open data be used in app development?
Yeah, sure. In any scenario, right? Whether you're starting a pizzeria or whether you're building a social networking and an application, right? You can use the data for a lot of information, whether you're getting geographical information, whether you're getting transportation data, right? I mean, there are New York City subway data available. So, depending on what that app you're building, I'm sure there's some data set within just in the NYC open data itself, there is plenty of data to be used.
Okay, great. That was a great response. So it's 8 o'clock now. I'm wondering if there's anyone that has any final questions before we wrap it up. Once again, don't be shy. We are all here to help. Okay. All right. So I guess that's all. So Thomas and Stan, again, thank you so much. I want to say, for the people who are representing Data NYC and the Mayor's Office for Data Analytics in the crowd, thank you guys for organizing, for giving us the platform to organize an event, to be a part of the Open Data Week. Once again, this is Jeffrey DeRose, the director at the CSI Tech Incubator. Thank you, Thomas. Thank you, Stan. If you guys just want to make some closing remarks before we close out.
Just a quick one word from me is that it's great that you have a lot of people interested in this. There's a lot of information available, so definitely utilize it. Like I mentioned earlier, a lot of businesses have no idea, of all the available data. We work with a lot of businesses and they have no idea, right? So, this is an opportunity for everyone to, harness this data, which is free, right? Open, free. And, you can start a whole, brand new business. Whether you came to build an app or anything else, but if you have an idea on how to use this data and to help other businesses or, organizations, there's a lot of contests that are going on, even within MTA. So you can, if you have an idea, you could bring it to them. So a lot of opportunities there. So thank you guys for joining. And have a good night. Stan?
I just want to echo, you guys taking an hour and a half on Monday to spend with us here. It shows that the topic is interesting to you. And that's a good start, because through educating yourself and persevering, anything could be accomplished. And as you'll see, and as you have seen, as you will see in the next probably 5 to 10 years, data will become more and more and more valuable as business becomes more and more and more competitive. So your interest will pay off handsomely. I wish you the best of luck in everything you do.
Absolutely. That was some great closing remarks from you guys. And also, if anyone needs also any help with their startups or starting a new venture, the Tech Incubator is here as a resource. More than happy to take a meeting with anybody and talk you guys through your ideas, share some of your resources, connect you with some of the people within our ecosystem to help you guys out, like Thomas, like Stan. So I just want to say, we're going to follow up with some information about the incubator. Ismail just dropped our website in the chat. We'll follow up with Thomas's information as well. And I just want to encourage you guys not to be shy to reach out. We are a resource here to help, and we want to make sure that we're helping power local entrepreneurs. So thank you all again, and to all a good night.
Thank you. Good night, guys.